Have you ever flown your airplane into a very busy Bravo airport? Well, we're going to talk to some of us that have, and also a tower controller in the hangar.
I used to be a well-respected member of the aviation community, and then I started flying to Cirrus, and that changed.
Oh, that was great until the engine quit.
And all of a sudden I see these explosions and these trees exploding.
I'm walking away a better pilot because of this discussion.
One of the most exciting things that we as pilots in general aviation can do is to fly into a very busy Bravo airport. I know that I've finally not finally, I've done a couple, but I've got with me some guys who have done a whole bunch of that. And let's go and meet them. First of all, Martin. Martin, thanks for coming on today. And you've got a lot of experience flying into Bravo airports. You've made it a goal of yours, right?
I would love to one day be able to say that I've flown into every single one of them in the U.S. A couple might be tricky. You know, Honolulu is a little far for the bonanza,
right.
And Washington Reagan National has some security concerns. But if I can get all the others checked off one day, I'll be very happy.
Okay, and then on my right, Josh Flowers. Josh, you know, your most successful video was flying into Chicago O'Hare,
right.
But you've done a little bit more than that.
Well, a lot of Bravos all over the place, mainly for, you know, I have a purpose to go in there. O'Hare was strictly for fun, but all the others, yeah, I've been into a lot of them.
Now, I've heard you've been to a Bravo airport once or twice, Brian Kelly.
5 days a week the last 11 years.
Right. So, Brian Kelly, you are a Bravo tower controller at Love Field in Dallas.
That is correct.
So, okay, well, let's just start right there. You know, have you always worked at a Bravo tower? Did you kind of come up through like some of the smaller airports?
It is my first and only facility that I have been in the agency so far.
Wow, okay, and is that pretty common with air traffic controllers?
At the time I got hired, yes, it could be, because they were going to every facility around the nation, and then they've changed the way they place new controllers now. And so it's more level 8s and 9s and below, and then you can work your way up to the higher level facilities. Dallas Love is a level 8 ATC facility.
Okay. Flying into Bravo airports as a general aviation pilot, only 4 years since I got my certificate, it's a big deal. I've been able to, I'm probably the one that's flown the least into Bravo out of you guys. For me, flying into Atlanta started, a week or two before. The thing I had to shoot was actually on the airport. So it was a lot easier just to fly into Atlanta. And I needed to be there at about 5 p.m. So there may have been a little bit of a push going on. But so let me ask you, how bad was that to the controllers that they've got a Centurion coming in to Atlanta?
We make space for it. We're trained on how to sequence airplanes. I'm not a radar guy, but that's what they do, and they hand them off to the tower, and we clear your lane and get you off the runway to let the next guy land, because there's somebody always behind you.
Would you believe they asked me to slow down?
No.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. They did. I'm in a Centurion. I'm thinking I need to keep my best speed forward, So I'm coming in, at 155 knots, and because that's what I can do, keep the flaps up, keep the gear up, everything up. And they actually told me slow down for sequencing. So
it was in front of you.
Yeah.
It was in front of you.
Yeah. I don't know. It was some regional. So I don't know. So Josh, what's been your experience? You said you flew into O'Hare for fun. Did you start like weeks before, or was that like a spur of the moment decision?
It was about a week ahead of time is when we started planning. So we called Tracon the evening before we were going to do it. We told them what we were going to do. We said we're going to be rolling cameras. This is our tail number. We're in a 172. What time do you want us to come in for one? Do you want us VFR, IFR? If you want us IFR, what arrival do you want us to file? And they told us all that stuff, and we did exactly what they wanted to. I think we ended up coming in around 11 p.m. It was in between some of the international arrivals and departures. But it was really a non-event. I mean, it's busy, and it's sequencing. At the end of the day, I come into Love all the time. And as far as flying the airplane goes, I'm the pilot in command of my aircraft. I'm going to fly the aircraft as I normally do, checklist speeds, etc. If I'm told to keep my speed up, I'll keep the speed up.
Right.
If I'm able, of course, or if I need to slow down, which
But if they tell you to slow down in your 172,
then,
then you do
sure?
that. Right.
But I mean, like into Love, I think the last 3 times I've done it, it's kind of become the norm now. I'm usually told to keep the speed up, and I'll keep it at the bottom of the yellow, about 130 knots. And I'll just come right in. It's a non-event. It's a busy airport. It's, there might be some taxi instructions and whatnot. but know ahead of time what FBO you want to go to, be ready and armed with your information, and it's beyond that. It's just talking to controllers. They might talk a little faster. There's more airplanes in the airspace. It's an airport, though. That's
Yeah.
it.
What about you, Martin?
Well, my first experience also was at O'Hare, just like
Oh, wow.
Josh. I did not call ATC, but I looked at any information I could find on the internet and internet forums. And at the time, there wasn't a whole lot. But I found some things. For example, what is metering? You deal with some concepts that don't exist at small.
Metering?
Yes, it's like an extra step between the clearance delivery and the ground control frequency, where you tell metering that you're ready for taxi, and then they'll work you into the ground sequence, and then the ground controller
Oh, wow.
tells you
I have
when
not
he's ready for
experienced
you,
that.
not the other way around. So that's one of the few things that's actually different when you deal with some of the busy Bravo airports, right? The other thing I did is I went on a Saturday morning, which I figured was going to be the quietest time possible on a nice, calm VFR day, and that worked out pretty well. There wasn't all that much traffic, and for a first experience going into one of these busy airports, that was probably helpful.
So when I was at Atlanta, I'd sweated and was excited about this for weeks heading up to it, and planned it out. Everything else, made calls, whatever I had to do. I had to come in at 5 or 6 because I had to meet the client. It wasn't a big deal. And in Atlanta, the runway that they were landing was right next to the FBO and the only FBO there. So it was, if anything, it was like simpler than Austin. I mean, it was just one runway left and boom, you're right there. It was the takeoff the next day that was the tricky part. So if you see somebody general aviation at Love Field, I guess you can tell by the way they make radio calls or anything else if you need to give them extra attention?
You could say that. Sometimes I'll slow down to make sure that they get it all in the first transmission. It's not that I'm being mean to them, because I'm not. I'm just making sure that they get everything that they need to get. And on clearance, on ground control, or tower frequency.
All right, so Martin, what's the most exciting Bravo large airport that you've ever done?
San Francisco. And there were a number of reasons for that. It was part of a trip that by itself was very exciting. It was the furthest I've ever had the Bonanza from my home base in Iowa. The approach over over the bay there is spectacular. Flying over mountains to get there when I live in the flatlands. So there were a number of factors. The airport was part of it, but all the Class Bravos are exciting in one way or another, right?
Do you still prepare? Do you still call TRACONs or anything else when you're doing the Bravos now, or has that become second hand and you don't do as much?
No, it takes a lot of preparation. I think it's less intimidating now that I've done a few of them, but the preparation is still the same. Starting with the SITs and stars,
right?
Which, most of us are not using very much outside of those large airports. The taxi diagram, trying to anticipate where you land and where the FBO is, and that takes a lot of the nervousness and the fear and confusion away once you're on the ground. So that requires some familiarization and even memorization, so you know what the fixes are that I might get sent to, what approaches exist, so that when it's the actual time, you don't hear these things for the first time.
Right.
That helps a lot.
Yeah. Josh, you're most exciting.
I'd have to think about that one. I mean, I've definitely had situations where aircraft are, they're all over the place and it's just incredibly busy, and you're just, one radio call after another. There was one particular time that I was ferrying another pilot over to Houston Hobby, and Hobby isn't that big of an airport.
No.
It's south of Intercontinental, but it's kind of in the middle of the whole metroplex.
Kind of like
there.
left field in a lot of ways.
It was incredibly busy. I almost couldn't even keep up with the traffic calls. It was great. And it's this, turbo normalized Mooney that I'm trying to manage, and G1000 arrival, okay, load the approach. And we're like in and out of IMC, and it was
Oh, wow.
very, very busy. So on kind of building on top of that from a training standpoint, it's incredibly important when you're going into a new environment like that to be proficient. Proficient with your radio work, be comfortable in the airplane that you're in. I wasn't entirely comfortable with that Mooney at the time.
Oh, okay.
It was a pretty new airplane to me. And that definitely kind of compounded and added on to me kind of getting behind some stuff, you know, dealing with the G1000, loading something, and then there's a traffic call, and then there's another traffic call, and then, oh, I'm an IMC, okay.
And then boom, you're behind.
You know, and you start to get behind. So being proficient is a big, big deal. You know, the 172 is not a fast airplane. Going into Love, there's an incredible difference between the approach speeds of the airplanes there. But going into Love is no sweat, because I'm very proficient in that airplane. I could fly that thing with my eyes
You don't have to
closed.
think. They
I
tell
don't
you
have to think to
yeah.
fly it, exactly. So beyond that, all I have to do is deal with the radios and the terminal area and, you know, all that stuff. So being proficient is a huge, huge part of it.
So Brian, should I go IFR or VFR into the Class Bravos?
Most likely IFR. We do a lot of VFR out of Love, in and out. We type in the flight following for you. So you go to, you know, Houston Hobby VFR or IFR. We'll do that for you. We do a lot of VFR departures. So for single engine props, it really doesn't change what we do.
Do you prefer? Okay, let's talk about approaches. And do you prefer that everybody to be IFR when they're coming in?
There's different rules for Class B separation. So in Class A, we were all taught that there's positive separation. Same thing in Class B, we're providing positive separation. And it depends on the size and type of your airplane. So if you're below 12,500 and you're reciprocating engine, it's one type of separation versus when you're next to another one or you're next to a jet or a turbine-powered airplane. And so we base our separation standards on whether you're VFR or IFR. If you're IFR, you're getting 3 miles and 1,000 feet until you're on a visual approach, or you report visual separation with the other airplane.
Okay, and then that's IFR. VFR is just a mile clear clouds, or
That's for cloud clearance, but for separation from other airplanes.
right.
And so
Is it different for VFR than IFR?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so you just said with the IFR, what's the VFR separation?
So it's 500 feet if we're going to run you right next to somebody, or just what we call green between the targets don't touch.
So if we file VFR flight following, if we file VFR flight following into a Bravo, it actually makes it a little bit easier for you.
Yes, I would say so.
Okay, interesting. Okay.
Pilot's perspective, though, I find it easier to go IFR than VFR because
They
from
tell
my
you what to do, yeah.
Well, and all the procedures are standardized, right?
Right.
The VORs, the names of the waypoints are different, but you do the same approaches, the same instructions that you always do at any airport. Whereas on a VFR flight, they expect that you know what the name of a football stadium is, or some bridge that they or freeway
Right.
that they use for reference, which makes perfect sense if you're familiar with the area. But if you're just visiting,
Right.
it can be quite difficult.
Yeah, and going into Houston Hobby, I've been told something, I can't remember, some plant, some meat packing plant or something.
There's tons of
Yeah,
waypoints
I know
out there,
the I-10 corridor, but I didn't know that one. Okay, cost. Martin, you've flown the most Bravos. When I've mentioned that I've landed at like Atlanta, everybody immediately goes, "Oh my gosh, how much did that cost?" What's been your experience as far as cost?
There's a tremendous range and variety. Atlanta was one of the cheapest I've been
Yep.
to. I think the landing fee was $6 and change, and there was a infrastructure fee or a security fee of $5, and that was it. Fuel was expensive.
Yes,
I did
when
buy
they
some
have it.
fuel when they have it. I've been lucky with fuel. San Francisco was the only one where I haven't been able to get avgas.
Atlanta does not have it right now.
That's
I promise
good
you.
to
You go
know.
land Atlanta
All
right now, they do not have it.
Yeah.
There's only one FBO and they're out of avgas.
When I went to Atlanta, it was a fuel stop from Florida to Iowa, probably the most unusual fuel stop
You would,
ever.
yeah,
for
I
the
would not
experience.
pick Hartsfield as a fuel stop.
The fuel at DFW right here, when I went there, was cheaper than at my home airport in Cedar. It was
Really?
$5 a gallon.
See, I've never landed DFW. I've always been too scared to do that. What's the fees at DFW? I've heard it's expensive. Isn't there like $100 landing fee or something?
No, it wasn't that much. There was a handling fee and a parking fee, but it was normal. It was what I was expecting for that size of airport. And the fuel was the cheapest of any of the Class Bravos I have been to.
Wow. Have you landed DFW?
I haven't landed at DFW, not yet.
And fees at Love Field, do you know?
No, I don't.
Yeah, you're up in the
Flying
tower,
around
yeah.
the tower.
They're not bad at Love Field. I know the particular FBO I go to, they give great service no matter what kind of size of airplane you're in. The fuel is $5.50 a gallon, $6, something like that.
Bad.
It's not terrible for a Bravo.
I mean, it's worse at some other places.
But usually if you get a certain amount of fuel,
They'll waive the fees.
they'll waive the facility
And that's
fees.
and that's what happened to me for Atlanta.
Right.
It ended up being hardly anything.
At Chicago O'Hare, I hear that it's expensive. We did a full stop taxi back and I never got a bill. So I hope the city of Chicago's not
So
watching.
Chicago, don't be watching.
No.
Most expensive,
Oh, easy. Boston.
Boston.
I went to Boston Logan once to drop off a passenger. We had relatives in town. My nephew had a commercial flight out of Logan, so I took him there. $268 for less than 1 hour on the ground and no services needed. And I didn't.
Did you get fuel?
No.
Oh man.
Now, in the FBO's defense, my understanding is most of that money is not going to the FBO, but it's collected by Massport, so it's the local.
Taxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I really felt they didn't want me there.
Well, yeah. I've heard the West Coast it can be expensive as well. Was San Francisco bad?
San Francisco was not bad. Now, that was also about 5 years ago.
Okay.
The only thing bad there was parking. If you just go there for the experience or spend a day and you return the same evening, it would have been pretty cheap. We ended up spending 2 nights there, and they don't have a nightly parking or daily parking rate. They go in 8-hour increments, and that
Oh, my.
tells you how quickly that can add up.
Wow.
But had we not stayed there for longer, it would have been very reasonable.
So if you just taxi back and take off again, you would have been
Might
fine.
not send you a bill. I'll take my word for it.
And they might not send you a bill. All right, very good. What would be, let's go around, your number one advice for a general aviation pilot who hasn't gone into a Bravo thinking about it?
Be prepared. Study the taxi diagram. Know what approaches and arrival procedures exist. These days with the internet, there's so much information available out there. There's YouTube videos. All the charts are available. You can listen in on liveatc.net and get an idea of what ATC sounds like there. And with that preparation, most pilots should be able to do it just fine.
Brian, what advice would you give?
He stole my thunder. I
Oh,
was
he-
going to say a taxi diagram.
Taxi diagram.
But also plot where your FBO is on the
Okay.
taxi
Yeah.
diagram. So highlight that and go, hey, if I exit here, this is going to be my route. If I exit here, this is going to be my route. And then when you're when you check the NOTAMs, hey, what taxiways are closed? Because there's a lot of construction going on at different airports right now.
Right.
And then the ATIS will have the most important ones on there. And so make sure you go, when you listen to the ATIS, mark those out so you know if those are closed. And if that takes you somewhere else, be prepared to just write it down, read it back, and then start going. But you got to start going pretty quick because somebody else is waiting to use the pavement behind you.
Okay.
Right.
Advice that's not preparation or look at taxis.
Be proficient.
Proficient.
I
Yeah.
think anybody on Freak could probably call out the rusty pilot in the airspace.
Right.
And you don't want to be that guy.
Right.
It's
Not going into a Bravo.
Not going into it. Well, not going into anywhere, but especially into a Bravo. It can get pretty intense at some points. But if you're proficient and you're comfortable in the airplane, you're comfortable with your radio work, and you got your charts and everything's all prepared, then the only thing you've got to worry about is dealing with the terminal area and dealing with the radio work. If you don't feel you're proficient, but you do for some reason have to go into the Bravo, take somebody with you. Take a CFI or take a friend.
Good idea.
Somebody who is proficient in that airplane, and just either be proficient yourself or take somebody with you that is proficient. That knocks a huge chunk of the apprehension away.
Very good. Very good. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on, talking about Bravo flying for general aviation. I appreciate it. And remember, as a pilot, some of the most exciting landing you can ever do is flying into that Bravo airport. So don't be afraid of it. Just prepare, as I said. Make sure you're proficient and know your taxi diagrams, and you'll do fine. We'll see you next time in the hangar.